the first thing I want to show you is Atelier Interactive used in fast drying mode, because it is basically a fast drying paint, but you are able to prolong the drying process when you feel like it. So we'll look at it in fast mode first of all. Now, one of the other things that you will be wondering about is what happens if you mix this paint with the brand that you're probably using, and if you're in America, you're probably using either Liquitex or Golden, and you probably already know that you can mix Liquitex and Golden together and they don't explode. And you're probably wondering what will happen if you mix either of them with Atelier Interactive, and the answer is nothing much really. They just mix quite happily into each other. So I'm using Interactive Transparent Yellow because I want a transparent yellow for a glaze, and I hope you've got some sort of transparent colour in your kit of paints that you can use instead. It doesn't have to be yellow, obviously, it can be anything. So because the transparent yellow is very transparent, it makes a terrific glaze, doesn't it? Surprisingly bright, and as you can see, it goes happily over the top of everything. Now, I'm just dipping my brush in water onto the rag to dry it off a little bit. I'm just softening the edges because this medium happens to be, I think, particularly nice for feathering edges and stuff like that. So there we've got traditional fast drying technique going into a glazing regime. If you're using this particular product called Universal Medium Varnish, you can probably put another glaze on 10 minutes from now if you want to keep on doing that. The next thing that I would like you to do with your interactive paint is to study its ability to be prolonged or even re-wet later on. So we need to have just the interactive paint to do this. So it's fairly easy to just squiggle your paint around like that straight out of the tube. And obviously, as we all know, paint that has just come out of the tube is quite easy to blend wet in wet. And this is how most Western painting has been done since 1450, when oil paint was invented. It's mostly about blending colours wet in wet to get a desired effect. So it's easy when it's just freshly out of the tube. However, I'm going to leave that for half an hour, and we'll come back to it and see what's happening. Now, the first sample strip over here is fast drying, so I've put that to one side. We're now going to look at prolonged drying, which is probably the kind of approach that you would take if you're using Atelier Interactive most of the time. So I'm going to take some of your unlocking formula and put it into a little bowl so that I can access it easily, because I want to keep painting wet in wet, and I can see that the paint over here is still wet. It might be sticky, but it's still wet. Where it's thicker, where it's come straight from the tube, it's still shiny, so I can see it's probably workable. But over here, this is already dry. Can we see that? Can you see my finger? So I want to be able to work on this whole area. So I'm going to start off with this bit here where the paint has dried. I'm putting some unlocking formula on it and allowing it to sweat in there a little bit, and you see it's re-wetting it, isn't it? So you're painting along over here, paint's gone a little bit, it's tacking up, but if I want to keep it nice and swooshy, the unlocking formula unlocks it. Dip your brush in unlocking formula if you've got a painting which is starting to tack up in places, or where you might have had thinly applied paint as I had in this area. You can just come back and keep it all in workable condition simply by dipping your brush in the unlocking formula and to keep going. There is a situation that occurs every evening. If you're an artist who's working every day and you sit down in your chair at the end of your day's work and you look at what you've done and you say, oh hell, there's something you wish the paint was still wet so that you could just retouch it a little bit or work in there and move something around a little bit. But unfortunately it's dry, and with conventional paint you're left with the problem that if it is dry you have to repaint the whole thing, however extensive that piece might be. Now I would normally use a spray, an atomizer spray. I think I've shown you that elsewhere, but I know you haven't got an atomizer, so I'm going to just take some unlocking formula and dribble it pretty generously onto there, because we've got to re-wet this whole area, and you can see it's re-wetting all right. I've still got a little bit of the yellow paint from what I did last. So I've made a little bit of a mess there, but I'll keep on going because it's quite an attractive looking mess. I just want to have enough unlocking formula to be able to penetrate the paint layer so that the paint is wet and is able to continue in the wet in wet mode. So here we go, it's penetrating that wet paint layer, that dried paint layer, and I'm able to do more blending. As you can see, I can smooth things out a bit if I want to. That's rather uneven. I thought I might like to just repaint that section. So essentially what I'm showing you here is that you're not stuck with what you've got. Need a little bit more liquid here because it's a fairly thick paint layer that I've got to etch back into. But as you can see, I can just integrate the wet paint back into the rest of the wet paint, and I can manipulate it just as if I was just continuously painting wet in wet, rather than doing what I am doing, which is coming back to a dry painting and doing a little bit of rearrangement of it. I think this is a really remarkable thing to be able to do this. Well, let's just recap what we've been doing in the sampling process. We've mixed interactive with your current brand. It didn't explode. You've been able to evaluate for yourself the quality level of the interactive paint. You can see that it's highly pigmented and that it has a pleasing consistency. So it all mixes in well with what you're currently using. And if you're working in normal fast drying technique, you can mix it with your other colors happily and everything works out well. Now, at the end of that little section, we came back and we put a glaze over the fast drying paint just so that you can see that it's easy to do layering with interactive. It doesn't interfere with the process. Then when we looked at the interactive paint by itself, we looked at prolonged drying, which is probably what you will mostly be doing if you are painting and you want to keep your painting in a working condition, painting with wet paint. You just dip your brush in unlocking formula whenever you need to. Now, if you get serious about this delayed painting process and you want to go one step further than just dipping your brush in the unlocking formula, you can get an atomizer spray and use that to spray the surface of your painting whenever you feel that you need to have the paint a little bit more workable. And obviously you can keep painting that way for as long as you like. And the important thing then to be aware of is that the unlocking formula evaporates at the same speed as water, and therefore when the paint dries, it'll dry quickly and you can overpaint again. Now, if you've used Golden Open, you've probably discovered that it stays open for a very long time and you're sort of in oil paint drying time territory. Whereas if you're using interactive and you're prolonging the drying process, you are in oil paint blending territory, but as soon as you stop adding the unlocking formula, your paint will dry normally, and if you've got more things you want to do, you can just keep on doing them. So I think we are in the very best of possible worlds. And the only other thing I can think of to add is that you may have noticed that the interactive tubes are 80mm tubes. They're quite a lot larger than the standard 60mm tubes that people in America are used to. So the paint is not only interesting, but it's very good value. And so I hope you will all rush to Blick and order some. Finally, having taken up so much of your time, I just want to thank you for your patience in watching this video and hopefully carrying out all of these processes yourself so that you can actually physically participate in what is happening rather than just reading about it or seeing it on this video. Thank you very much.